Hi, I'm Edric,
I'm Joy.
and we're here to help you.
Get it right from the start.
So today we want to jump straight in and make sure that we give you as much value as possible and help you guys in your parenting journey wherever you are. We're going to jump straight into this, and the whole topic today is about marriage. We have been married for 24 years. Gonna be this year, 2025. Not sure when you're listening to this. I won't tell you the month to keep it a secret, but for sure it's gonna be 24 and 2025. And we touched on this in a number of dialogues in the past, but we decided to go deeper because many parents, in their sincere desire to raise their kids, neglect the fact that for them to have good parenting, it must start with a good, healthy marriage.
Yeah. Yeah. I wanted to just read, you and I came across this book a long time ago by John Piper called This Momentary Marriage, right? And these are some of the things he wrote in it. He said, marriage is the doing of God and the display of God. It is meant to put the gospel reality on display in the world. It's about telling the truth with our lives. It is the display of the covenant-keeping love of Christ. And I remember I was so struck by this because before this, I'd always thought of marriage as obviously something between you and I, but I've not thought of the weight of it in terms of how it's supposed to be, how we put the covenant love of God on display, like his commitment towards us. And that's why to our children, to others, to the world, we must model a healthy relationship, because in any family, that's like the first reference point for a child to understand what is love. And if we're going to talk about God's love and God's goodness, but we don't have a healthy marriage, healthy relationship, what is going to convince a child that God is really good, the designer of marriage, right? And that really struck me because all of a sudden I started to feel like, oh my, in what ways am I not displaying God's love well in my marriage? And you and I both had to think about that. And I think through the years, of course, we've had to grow in so many ways. We're still growing. But that was one of the things that really struck me, that it's ultimately for the glory of God.
I like how you already elevated it, which is really the end picture of it, right? It's really for God's glory. But bring it back on the ground, if you will. What has stuck with me for many years is a story that you've heard me tell many times, right? When my relatives, on my side, so not married to you yet, not married to you yet for sure. We were growing up, we were kids. I remember we would get together with many of our cousins and we'd have so much fun. But there was one gathering where we had family flying in from all over. And when we gathered and had fun with our cousins, one of them started to cry because they heard something like, my parents said they're going to separate because they love us. And I think my dad heard that. And so he gathered me and my siblings and he sat us together and he said something I never forgot. He said, kids, you cannot tell your children you love them unless you love your spouse first. And that has stuck with me. And this is why we're having this conversation now. And I'm echoing the importance of, even as we journey in the parenting space or as we raise our kids, we cannot neglect our marriages, because in order for me to love our 6 kids and show them that, I need to show them that I love you first. And let me read from you this passage.
Read for me? Or
Read for all of us this passage that I think captures, or not I think, but we see clearly captures that elevated picture of marriage and why it's more important than the parenting relationship. It has to take a precedence. It says here, Ephesians 5, verse 31 down to 33. 31 says, therefore a man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh, right? This is the ESV version, so it's a little bit easier English. And it quotes this first verse from the original statement in Genesis, right? Therefore, a man shall leave a father and mother. So in the original design. And then Paul, as he's saying these verses, 31, he goes on to 32. This mystery is profound. And I'm saying that it refers to Christ and the church. And then he closes the chapter with verse 33, which reinforces the roles. However, let each one of you love his wife as himself. That's for the man. And let the wife see that she respects her husband. So Paul essentially sets up the whole purpose of marriage there by saying, what is its main purpose? And why is it so special as apart from all the other relationships that God has been able to build, even parent and child relationship? He said that this mystery is profound, but I'm talking with reference to Christ and the church. So essentially, in a nutshell, as John Piper helped us learn many years back, the picture is husband and wife are supposed to show and reflect the relationship of Jesus and the church. So that sounds very spiritual to those of you listening and watching, but in very simple terms, it looks like this. Me as a husband to you, Joy, when our kids watch us, do they see how Jesus is supposed to love his church? Am I kind and considerate and selfless versus selfish? And I'm cringing a little bit because I mean, if I'm to be honest, I'm more selfish than I want to be selfless, right? And then the same way, the way that the church responds and loves
And
Christ
honors,
and honors that relationship, is that what the children see in our marriage, or is that what people see? Is she respectful towards me? Is she submissive? The Bible says in that same stretch there, right? So all of those things are not so much for wife or for husband, and not so much for Joy or for Edric, but it's supposed to be able to show that showcase of God's relationship with us, Christ and the church, and that is a big, big, big responsibility because of its weight and what it is designed to do, right? And this is why we're emphasizing it in the relationship you have in your family or in the many different relationships you're involved in. The marriage relationship is very special and unique in that way.
And I think interestingly, right, even if you look at the research, because I did research, it shows that if you have a Christ-centered marriage, like a healthy marriage, then it profoundly affects the likelihood of future relationship success for your children. And it reduced the risk of divorce and unhealthy attachments for your children. And so I think when we see today why there are so many broken marriages and then dysfunctional children also, I think we need to look at ourselves as parents. We can't be blaming society, although of course there's lots of things in society that are wrong. We can't be, putting the blame on the church and making it the responsibility of the church or even the school or even the peers. In the home, fundamentally, we are supposed to really do our part to model a healthy marriage.
So how do we do that? Let's give
so
some
how do we
practical
do that?
tips.
Yeah.
How do you have a healthy marriage? Now, this is broad, but with the end goal of making sure that this is a reflection of Christ's relationship with his church. And bringing back those terms earlier, because it can be big words.
I did a lot of
I'd
research.
love to hear what you have to say, because for those of you that follow our other platform, right, Mondays, this is a little bit of a spillover now. Let's hear it. Practical tips.
But I
How
think-
can couples have healthy marriages, especially those that are all parents that are listening?
But just
or
so that people
watching
understand
this.
why we're emphasizing marriage in what's supposed to be like a family podcast, is because fundamentally, if this is not healthy,
As I said earlier,
the
yes.
parenting,
Yes.
the family, the future of the children also will be affected adversely.
There
So
are many distortions. And
I was so
complexities.
happy to discover, as I did research, that many of the things that we've been practicing already in our marriage that we've learned from others are what they outlined here.
go.
So it could be just like a review because we can still improve. But one of the first was open communication. And not just about like being able to talk about anything, but each partner really practicing active listening, which is the desire to genuinely understand, right, where the other is coming from and responding to those bids for connection. And then the other one was to show love and affection regularly in front of children, which I give you credit because you are very demonstrative. So you do this to me all the time in front of the kids, and sometimes they're icky about it, like, ew, gross. But I think deep inside, it fosters a sense of security, seeing that mom and dad really do love each other, that they are happily married.
I'll kiss you in front of the kids. And one of
Yeah.
our youngest one always says, ew, ew. But then if you're watching this on video, she'll cover her face and then pop open her eyes and take
And
a
then
peek
she's smiling.
because she's smiling. Because even if she's outwardly saying ew, she's delighted to see that mom and dad really are affectionate and love each other.
And so it's not just the hugging and the kissing, this displays of affection, but it's also about complimenting and affirming one another in front of the children.
And
Like,
where's
it
this data
matters.
come from? I'm curious.
Secret.
Is it a 3-letter acronym that begins with G?
And then also dating each other. And do you remember when we first started practicing dating each other with our first child? And he would cry because he was always sad that we would be leaving the house. But we made it a point from the very beginning of our marriage relationship
You're right.
to have regular date nights. Sometimes we'd have to brief the kids and remind them why we do this, but eventually they totally understood and they were excited for us to go out and they respected our space.
And
So
quick pause for the friends of ours who are listening to this or even watching this. This is so important. Even if your kid, very young, is kicking and screaming because you're going out on date night with your husband, it's okay.
Yeah.
Because let's go to it.
Well, one of the authors that I've read before, he's one of the foremost child developmental psychologists. He said that when parents practice child-centric parenting,
This is Dr. John Roseman.
yes, then the children tend to be very unhealthy, actually, emotionally, and they feel like they can manipulate the family because it's all about them, and they
Right.
grow up to be pretty spoiled as
Right.
well.
So bring it back to the Elijah. Because you were
Yes.
saying with Elijah, initially he would be kicking and screaming because I would take you out on date nights.
Right.
And
And as a
then,
mom, I'd be tempted, right? Oh my goodness, my son really wants to be with us. And of course my heart would go out to him. And this would also happen when we go on trips, just the two of us. But I had to learn also as a mom that it's very healthy for our children to see that we have our own identity as a married couple as well. Of course, we love them, we care about them, but we are very committed to our marriage and making sure we have a healthy relationship. And so, and
years
then the
later,
other, and then years later, yeah.
So years later, what's interesting is as the younger children, because Elijah's the eldest, as the younger children would be kicking and screaming, Elijah and even the other boys, as they had their turns of really growing up, they would tell the younger kids and say, it's okay. Mommy and daddy need to go on date night because it helps them with their marriage. They get the messaging.
Yeah.
It really becomes something that sticks with them. So carry on.
Yeah.
Other tips, healthy marriage.
So under this being, loving and affectionate regularly in front of the children, the other thing that was shared here was you need to serve one another also. And I've had to grow in this area, and you know this, because that was not necessarily an area that I was really excited about doing. Because I grew up in a household where you serve yourself, and if you can do it for yourself, do it for yourself. So I really had to adjust. And
Are still adjusting.
I'm still adjusting, but it was good that I heard this again. It's a reinforcement that it's important for the kids to see that I delight to serve you, right? And I think vice versa. You've been very gentlemanly towards me through all the years, and it's also rubbed off on our kids because when I'm out with our sons, they open the door for me. They make sure that I'm protected, and it's kind of ingrained into them because you modeled it first. So
I have two
hopefully
quick
it'll
ones.
translate into their future relationships as well. Yeah.
I have two quick ones as you go through your research-based tips here. One is make sure the roles are very clear also. I think that maybe goes without saying, but if this is new for you, it has to be very clear. I mean, think about all the other functional areas we're in, whether it's work or if you're involved in any church ministry. If there were no roles between you and the people you're working with, it's going to create chaos. So we need to remember that in marriage, the relationship that we are dealing with fundamentally, we're living with day in and day out. If the roles are not clear, that's also going to create chaos. So the basis of your roles then becomes critical for us because we are Christians.
It's that passage.
It's
that you-
exactly what's mentioned in the passage. Mentioned in the passage. So I want to read that again, so that it's biblical. Let each one of you love his wife as himself, husbands, to love. And then let the wife see that she respects her husband. So in a few words, there is the need for me to lead and love. Whether I like it or not, I need to be able to show this and do this as my role.
And in the previous passages further up,
There's many of them
more
which
details, yeah.
we don't have enough time to unpack here. But for the woman, it is then to respect and support.
Yeah.
So it might sound off to some people listening to this, and this is why it's important for us to state our source. We're not the one that designed marriage. We believe that it is God who designed it, and because He designed it, we're looking to His playbook. So that's what He said, and we've seen this. We now have the privilege of seeing it work in our marriage and in many marriages that have gone before us and that are on the same level, and those have also been destroyed. So that is one quick tip I have. Make sure that the rules are clear, and then you can even specify that further, because I like talking about money, even in the areas of money. What are your money roles? Who handles what? What are the parameters behind that? And this can be a major breakthrough for many couples, because one of the biggest reasons couples fight is because of money. So set those rules clearly, even in the area of money, right? So the second tip I have is, very quickly, is fighting fair. And I'm sharing this as kind of like my all-time greats, because of the various couples we have worked with and seen heal and
State your
restored,
source, yeah.
right? Experience.
But state your source for the fighting fair.
Yes, and then for our marriage as well, fighting fair comes from Craig Rochelle. He talked about how in marriage it's inevitable that you will have conflict. So for couples that are saying, "Oh, we will never fight," good luck with that. I mean, frankly, in our life, when there's movement, there's friction. I like saying that. So when your marriage is headed somewhere good, there's going to be friction. You look biblically, the devil is not happy with where it's going. The devil will find a way to also destroy that, because that's what the devil does. So how do you fight fair? Fighting fair is essentially being able to say, when it happens, clarify a few things. And it's helpful that you hear this now before you go into the conflict. Number one, focus on the issue. When you're having conflict already, make sure you actually ask, and it's very clear. So what are you offended about? Or what are you upset about? Or what are we arguing about? Let's be clear on the main issue. When you're able to identify the main issue and you're focused on that, fighting fair is this. You don't start saying who's right or who's wrong, because that can go in so many different directions. Instead, you focus on, how do we resolve that issue which we've both been able to articulate? That is fighting fair. So 2 quick tips from me. Back to you, babe.
That was actually the next one, is how it's managing conflicts in a healthy way. And of course, one of the things that we've always told couples, which has always also been validated by research, is don't argue in front of your children. But at the same time, children, whether you argue in front of them or not, they can sense when something is wrong. And so, like you said, it's important to model how to reconcile with one another, because this will help them in the future with their own conflicts, whether it's with their siblings or with friends or a future spouse. Yeah. So you have to model a reconciliation and resolution. And then the fourth thing, and we've talked about this before, it's having that united front when it comes to rules and discipline, where we are consistent about the things that our children need to obey.
No such thing as a good cop and bad cop.
Yes.
You're both the cop that needs to be at the moment, right?
Yeah. And a lot of times I always defer to Edric. I will tell the kids, let's ask your daddy, because he's the boss. And I want them to understand that. And honestly, it relieves me of some pressure also, because if there's just one head, and then I'm supportive of that, and then we agree on what's okay and not okay for our children, then it makes it, I think it gives the kids clear boundaries as well. And it's not like, oh, if mom says no, I can go to dad and he will actually
Which they
say
try
yes.
to do.
Which
if we're honest,
children-
right? They will try and do
Children
that.
will try to do those things, but they know if dad says no, then it's a no, and we
So
have
it's
the
important
same.
that dad and mom talk about these things.
Yes, that we have to agree.
Right?
Yeah.
Because they could be sneaking behind our backs and doing that and not really like it happened. One time we're like, what? One of our children, who will remain unnamed, was actually asking dad, then mom, and getting away with it until one of the siblings squealed and said, Dad, did you know that XYZ has been going to mom? Because they know that she will say yes, even if you said no. I'm like, really? So then we locked in, and that's not happening anymore.
No,
right?
no, yeah.
Not last we checked. So any final tips from you,
Yeah,
honey?
so the last one would just be like having a balanced home environment where you preserve that family time, that togetherness, which we try to do as well. Like we have dinners together. In fact, we have this little saying in our house where Edric will say, if the king is, what is it?
If the king is here, the queen stays near.
Yeah.
And the kids now chant that also. In other words,
In other words, like we will all stay at the table together to finish our meal, and nobody's really allowed to excuse themselves until we're all done. And so I think it's important for the kids to say
that you're
to
modeling
see
that.
that I model that as well. Like if their dad is at the dinner table, I'm there because I want to be with him. I want to spend time with him, and then we all end up spending time together, and that's when a lot of great conversations happen. And that's where they also see a lot of times they get a glimpse of what our marriage is like through these meals together. And of course, through our fun interactions with one another as well as a family. And so, there's no perfect marriage out there. Even you and I, we still struggle with different areas, but the longer we are married for, the more I see that God's word and his truths about marriage stand. And when people follow them, they have blessed marriages and blessed families. And when they don't, the opposite happens. So
Fantastic. So, and there's so much more we can say because marriage is very near and dear to our heart and into the hearts of many people we've also journeyed with. So, if you want more, you can catch them Mondays. I did talk about that, right? So, catch them there. But the whole point of weaving this in here, we'll say it again for emphasis, is if you want to have a healthy family, it starts with a healthy marriage. So, once again, I'm Edric,
I'm Joy.
and our passionate desire is to help you
Get it right from the start.